Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Amy Fonseca. I'm the Supervising Program Administrator for the Grants and Partnership Program here at Valley Water. Today, we'll be going through our current competitive grant opportunity, which we call the standard grants. And this category this year will be implementation, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that is and the eligibility. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce our team, and I will start with Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Lee. I'm the Senior Management Analyst with our Grants and Partnerships program, and I primarily help oversee standard grants. I will pass it over to Robert.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Robert Marmito, Management Analyst 2, working on the Grants and Partnerships team, providing support with standard grants as well as the mini grants. And then I'll pass it over to Clarissa.
Hi, everybody. My name is Clarissa Sanglang, Management Analyst on our Grants and Partnerships team, and I primarily support refill station grants and a little bit of mini grants. Next, I'll pass it to Camille.
Hi, everyone. My name is Camille Lemaster, and I'm Staff Analyst for the Grants and Partnerships program here at Valley Water, and I primarily assist with the standard grants.
Great. Next slide. All right. If you'd like to follow along with the grant guidelines, we do have those available. We encourage you to download them if you haven't already done so to follow along. You can view and download the file by following the link on the slide here. We can also pop that into the chat. And as we go through the program, we will be showing the corresponding pages or sections of the guidelines so you can kind of follow along. Next slide. All right, here's a quick overview of today's agenda. First, we will dive into Valley Water's mission in our Safe Clean Water program. Then we'll provide an overview of the redesigned standard grants program, which will lead us to talk about the newest category that we are introducing this year, the implementation grants. This is the first time that we are offering this particular category, so it may be new to folks that are returning prior grantees. After that, we'll cover some tips for maximizing your standard grant application, and this will help you submit a strong proposal and kind of go through the different questions and provide some guidance. And then finally, we'll open it up for questions and answers. However, feel free to put your question into the question and answer chat area, and if we have time, depending on timing, we can kind of stop throughout. But if we notice a lot of questions coming in, we may save them. But we do have dedicated time between some of the different sections to answer questions that you may have. All right, next slide. And I'd also like to mention that this program, a recording of this workshop, will be made available on our website, and that'll probably be posted later this week. So keep an eye on that. If you want to share it with anybody or any of your coworkers, feel free to do so. Okay, jumping right in. Valley Water's mission. For those who are not familiar with us, we are the Santa Clara Valley Water District, and we're also known as Valley Water. We are a public agency that's a special district in the state of California, and we're mostly known as the wholesale drinking water provider for Santa Clara County. But we also manage the region's waterways and flood protection activities to help create healthy creeks and ecosystems. Valley Water's mission, as you see here, is to provide Silicon Valley with safe, clean water for a healthy life, environment, and economy. Each of our grant funding opportunities are based on these three pillars, and they are clean, reliable water, flood protection, and healthy creeks and ecosystems. So as we go through the presentation, you'll kind of want to keep those three pillars in mind because that's what our program is designed around. Okay, next slide. But first, we'll dive into the funding source. So back in 2020, voters approved Measure S, which secured about $47 million each year for local projects. These projects focus on ensuring safe, clean water and improving the natural flood protection and environmental stewardship for our communities. Out of the $47 million, For this program, we have 1.8 allocated annually for our external standard grant opportunity each year. And again, standard grants are competitive grants. Next slide, please. Okay, our outgoing grant funding opportunities are administered by our Grants and Partnership program under the External Affairs Division here at Valley Water. We are funded through that voter-approved special parcel text called the Safe Clean Water and Natural Flood Protection Program. Also, we'll usually use the short version, Safe Clean Water. All of the grants and partnership funding have been consolidated into Priority F, F9. Priority F provides funding opportunities to leverage community resources to fund projects and programs to increase collaborations and partnerships for environmental projects and stewardship activities, and allows us to work with cities, the county, nonprofit organizations, schools, and other community stakeholders. The grant's key performance indicators are outlined here in Project F9 and can be found on our website. These are public dollars, and our goal is to ensure that the public benefits from them. We have 4 funding opportunities available, and we will be discussing the standard grant will be the focus of our presentation today, but we also have mini grants, water bottle filling station, and partnership funding opportunities. Next slide. So here's a comparison of our different grant opportunities side by side. It's an overview, and we'd like to go through a little bit. So this year, for the implementation category, the grant amount is up to $500,000 per project, and we currently have $1.87 million available this year for those projects. The agreement term is approximately 5 years, and it is a reimbursement-based program, meaning you would have to pay for services, supplies, and staff ahead of time, and then you would submit receipts to us for reimbursement. The application period runs from February 23rd to April 24th. So applications will be due on April 24th. We also have a mini grant program that's for smaller projects. And we award up to $10,000 each per project. We still have funding, but it is available on a rolling basis. These agreements are smaller scale, so the agreement terms tend to be 2 years. And with this one's a little different. We provide 50%, so $5,000 if you're awarded upfront once the agreement is signed. Once you complete the project, we'll pay the remainder of the $10,000, so $5,000, upon completion of the program. And those funds are available until we run out on a fiscal year basis. So our fiscal year starts July 1st, so we'll have a new set of funds available. We also have our refill station grants, and those are $5,000 per station. Also $100,000 available for those. That agreement term is 1 year, and we pay 50% up front, and then the remainder upon completion, similar to the mini grant. And that is also a year-round rolling opportunity. So it's first come, first serve until we run out, and then it starts up again the next fiscal year, so July 1st. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, last year we completed and launched our grant redesign project, which included improvements and updates to our grants program based on the feedback we received from our grantees and the community, and from our internal stakeholders. This community-based program is funded by public resources, and these updates aim to better serve you. Here's a quick look at those key changes. We've introduced, again, those 4 grant categories, which is different from folks who may have been around prior years. The match requirement has been reduced. For implementation grants, it's 15%. And we'll get into that a little later in the presentation. Full funding is provided, so if you are awarded, you'll get the amount requested, so long as it falls within the allowable limits. Insurance costs, if it's applicable, can be covered as part of your grant funding. And the application and agreement process was streamlined. And we've also simplified invoicing for those who are awarded. All right, next slide. Okay, on this slide, you'll see some highlights about the grant cycle. So most importantly, the grants will be due April 24th, 2026 at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. So be sure to get your application in well before then. But we will be reviewing applications until May. We'll present those recommendations from our evaluation panel to the board in June, and you would likely receive your notice later that summer in July, and then we would be working on and executing agreements. So realistically, if you do apply and you are awarded, the funds would be available. You'd be able to start probably January 2027. So those are our key dates. Okay. Okay, well, I do see some questions, but let's get a little bit into the presentation and then we can maybe pause. So with that, I will hand it off to Clarissa.
Thank you, Amy. So as she mentioned, this year we are offering our new standard grant category, which is implementation grant. It's the first time we are offering this category. And I'll go over some of the eligibility requirements and kind of an overview of implementation and what you need to do to submit a successful application. So next slide, please. So for implementation grants, the projects are, large construction or capital projects that are shovel ready or ready to be implemented. The project should have strong ties to the Safe Clean Water Program priorities. So these would be the three pillars that Amy mentioned earlier. Um, the grant requests are up to $500,000 per project, and the agreement period is up to 5 years. For this category implementation, 15% match of the total project cost is required. And another requirement is to have completed the CEQA compliance at the time of application. And we'll go over that a little more in depth later in this presentation. Next slide, please. So on this slide, it shows what types of organizations are eligible to apply for the implementation grants. You'll see public agencies, and that includes the special districts. If you're an eligible applicant, you can apply for more than one project. They need to be separate projects, but you are welcome to apply more than once. If you are not sure about eligibility, then you can reach out to us and we can discuss your specific situation. The last bullet on this slide shows that non-government organizations can partner with a public agency, but the applicant must be that public agency. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows you examples of eligible projects and activities. Again, just reiterating, the projects must have a strong connection to safe, clean drinking water, flood protection, and environmental stewardship. So as you prepare to write your scope, just think about how your project ties into one or more of the three pillars. And we do want to emphasize that the project should be an individual project. It's distinct from ongoing operational or maintenance work, and it should be shovel ready, and it should have measurable benefits. Speaking of benefits, the project should be located in or benefit the residents of Santa Clara County. And this just helps to ensure that the impact of the Safe Clean Water funding provides, direct significant benefits to the local community. And next slide, please. Here's an example of a grant with implementation component. So as we mentioned, this is the first time we have this implementation category. So this example shows a previous grant project that has elements of an implementation type of grant. This is from Mid-Peninsula Open Space District, and their project was the Henry's Creek Restoration Project. And you'll see some of the activities on the screen there, and it gives you an idea of what kind of activities are eligible for this category. And next slide, please. Okay, we talked about what's eligible. I'll now go over what's ineligible. You see the bullets here on the slide. Again, just overarching it, if the activities or the projects do not demonstrate a connection to the Safe Clean Water Program priorities, then they won't be funded. But other ineligible projects and activities could be an incomplete CEQA compliance at the time of application. Any advocacy or political activities are ineligible as well. If the project is inaccessible or it requires a fee for public participation, then that would be ineligible. Mitigation projects, activities that are required or designed to meet regulatory or permit obligations, or as I mentioned, if it's ongoing operations and maintenance of existing programs. And then another one there, it may not be on the screen, but you'll see it in the guidelines. If the project is receiving funds from another Valley Water program, then it would be ineligible for the grant as well. Okay, next slide, please. So this slide shows some requirements that must be submitted with your application. And you would need to upload the documents to the application. I won't go over the bullets one by one, but I do want to point out specific things. The first is our application is online. The URL is there at the first bullet, valuewater.flux.io, and it's also in the chat. So you can view the application online, you can complete it online. And our Flux portal is the central hub for where you can submit and upload the related documentation. We do only accept the applications through this portal. We don't accept hard copies or email submissions. I'd like to point out the last bullet, which is letters of support. That is optional. If you have that available, then you can submit it. We will not accept letters of support from Valley Water employees. Okay, next slide, please. One of the requirements is a resolution. And this is a document that identifies the authorized signatory for your organization. And this is the individual who has a legal authority to sign and submit the grant application on behalf of your organization. So this document, it does need to be signed by your organization's governing body, and that looks different depending on the organization. But this documentation would show that the governing body, voted and approved this grant application, and they did identify the signatory. We actually have a template resolution. It is already uploaded on our resource webpage, and it's in our grant guidelines for your reference. So there's specific language that we usually look for in resolutions, and you can see that in the template. There are some concerns with timing. So if the schedule for your governing body is after the application deadline, then you can include, the upcoming date of the meeting and include where you are in the process of adding to the agenda. And feel free to reach out to us and schedule a meeting to discuss your specific situation. Okay, next slide. Another requirement um, I'd like to go over is the insurance. So insurance costs are now eligible costs in your grant request. So you can include them in your budget and you can be reimbursed for them. The types of insurance required will be different depending on your agency and depending on your project. But we do have standard requirements across the board. Each project should be insured for the entire term of the agreement. And more specific requirements are in the guidelines. Um, Typically, though, all endorsements and insurance documentations should be submitted before the agreement is executed. So you can apply with those things pending, but before we can execute the agreement, we need all insurance documents. Um, and again, this varies by agency. So please feel free to reach out to us so we can talk about your specific situation. Okay, I will pass it on to Michael to cover the next slide.
All right, thanks, Clarissa. So as we've already mentioned about CEQA, in addition to insurance coverage, Valley Water must comply with the California Environmental Quality Act. So as a public agency, we are required to have CEQA review for all of our projects, even for grant projects. And CEQA requires Valley Water to analyze a project's potential environmental impact. And this is going to be done exclusively by our environmental planning staff. And they'll be doing the reviews of your CEQA documents that you submit with your applications. And essentially, they'll be operating as the responsible agency to the lead agency, which would be yourself, the public agency that applies for the grant. Um, I think we can go to the next slide now. So this just details some of the definitions of what we're defining as the lead agency and responsible agency. So the process will be once we receive the applications and environment, and if your project is awarded, an environmental planner will have a chance to review your CEQA documentation and conduct a responsible agency findings review. Some of the documents that are considered complete for CEQA that will need to be submitted with your application are any related CEQA reports or documents such as MNDs or EIRs or any categorical exemption documentation that you have, as well as any notices such as NODs or NOEs that are filed with the Santa Clara County Clerk Recorder's Office. So if you have any questions about the CEQA compliance, please feel free to put it in the chat or reach out to us independently to schedule a meeting with us. Next slide. So now that we've covered some CEQA and permitting requirements, we're going to move on to some other key items to keep in mind as you prepare your grant proposals. So if you're selected for funding, grantees will have 5 years to complete the project tasks after the agreement is executed. So the 5-year term will start from the agreement execution date and then 5 years from that. As Amy had mentioned, or as we had mentioned before, all standard grants are reimbursement based. So it is important to plan your budget accordingly. And projects must demonstrate a clear public access and benefit within Santa Clara County. If your project is not open to the general public, for example, it's a particular area with sensitive species habitat that's inaccessible, please be sure to explain why and emphasize on some of the other project benefits that you're proposing. Please also remember that you won't be able to be reimbursed for any work that is done before the agreement effective date. So, for example, if you're incurring costs on the project before the agreement is officially executed, those costs cannot be reimbursed with the grant funding. And lastly, throughout your project, grant staff will be your main point of contact to provide support and facilitate the grant administration process. So please feel free to reach out to us at any time. Next slide. And I will pass it back to Amy.
All right. Before we get into the questions, looks like we have a few here, good ones. Just wanted to remind everybody on the next steps. You'll want to read the fiscal year 26 standard grant guidelines thoroughly. It will answer, this is just a brief overview. The guidelines will answer all of your questions. It's a great resource. It explains exactly how the applications will be scored, give some tips on what to put into your application, the type of information that you'll need. Um, it also has the application questions themselves, if you want to use that while you're kind of putting your project together before you go into Flux. So that is a great resource. So highly recommend that you take a look at that. You'll want to visit our website and register for Flux if you don't already have an account and to access the application form. We recommend that you do that early, just in case there are any technical difficulties. Just make sure that you have that registration complete. It can take up to 24 hours, 24 business day hours, to get that approved. And again, the applications are due April 24th at 11:59 p.m. Please don't wait, however, because we would hate for you to miss the deadline due to technical difficulties. We have a lot of other resources for you. They can be found at valleywater.org/grant resources. So this recording will be posted there. We have a frequently asked questions and answers document that we update regularly. We have the award and timeline process. Those grant guidelines are located there, and a user guide for using the Flux grants management system. In addition, we are available for appointments, and we recommend that you feel free to do that. We can provide answers to some of your project-specific questions. We can provide guidance on some of the application requirements. We can help you figure out whether or not your project is likely to be eligible. So we are here as a resource, and feel free to work with us. Next slide. Okay, before we move on to Q&A, I just wanted to, again, give a plug for our other grant opportunities. We do have a mini grant program, and that one, again, is up to $10,000 per project. The application is much simpler than the standard grants. It's not competitive. It's sort of a first come, first serve. And we work with you to craft a scope and application. So that is a little bit more hands-on from our end. But these can be any kind of project. We have all kinds for activities and projects that, again, promote our three pillars. So that would be safe, clean drinking water, water conservation, flood protection, or environmental stewardship. So feel free to take a look at our website, valleywater.org/mini grants. We have a lot of examples of projects that we funded in the past. And again, it's first come, first serve until the funds run out. And then new funding will be available July 1st. We also have a refill station grant program opportunity, and we can provide up to $5,000 per water bottle filling station. The funds are for you to purchase, install, and maintain. The water bottle filling station has to be located within Santa Clara County. And there's an example right there in the presentation of a water bottle filling station that we funded. And this one is also available on a rolling basis. You would get half the funds up front and then half the funds, the remaining half, when you complete the project. We do prioritize one grant per organization for the refill and mini grant. But towards the end of the year, the fiscal year, if we still have funds remaining, we may consider additional applications for the mini grant and refill station grants. All right, that was a lot of information. We're about halfway through, so we're going to take some Q&A. We will have a staff CEQA planner on hand a little bit later in the presentation. So we do have a subject matter expert if you have any CEQA specific questions. Okay, well, I'll just start going down the list. So the first question is from Vina. Is there any concern or restriction with applying to both the mini grant and standard grant program? We are applying as a city for both, but for two completely different projects. The answer is there is no concern. They do operate as separate programs. So if you apply for a mini grant and a standard grant, no problem at all. You have the key word there. It's a separate project. So we don't offer multiple grants for the same project for a single project, but we can offer multiple grants for multiple projects. For standard grants, when does the performance period start and end? So the performance is tied to the agreement terms. And so whenever the agreement is executed, so our CEO signs, that would be the date. And from that date, you have 5 years to complete the project. And so, like I mentioned before, it can take some time after award to get the agreement together. It has to go through our legal, through CEQA. So that process can take a few months. So realistically, we're probably looking at a January or maybe a little bit further start date for the application term. Okay, next question is from Katrina. Can costs incurred prior to the execution of a standard grant be used for cost share? For example, design and permitting. Michael, do you want to try to take that one?
Yeah, I can give an attempt to answer it. Hopefully I am understanding the question correctly, but um, so long as the costs are incurred after the execution of the agreement, so any costs, receipts or invoices that you would receive from a contractor or a subconsultant, so long as those were incurred after the execution date and dated after, those would be eligible for reimbursement. And those can include design, permitting, post-construction, pre-construction, anything like that. We no longer offer retroactive start dates. So any costs, project work, it would have to occur after the execution date to be reimbursed. So in the past, I think at some point we had given retroactive start dates so that projects could start, incurring some costs, but we no longer offer that. Hopefully that answers your question.
All right. Next question from Katrina. Does Valley Water have any concerns about projects documenting their exemption from CEQA through statutory exemption for restoration projects? And then she provides a link to the wildlife.ca.gov. Michael, do you think you can answer that, or should we wait for our SME?
Yeah, I think this question is more appropriate for our environmental planning SME. However, I can say that, so long as your project, and they may, again, we can wait to see what they say, but so long as your project shows coverage under an exemption, and your lead as the lead agency, you can provide documentation of that. From a grants perspective, it shouldn't be an issue, but again, we can wait for the SME to come and provide some more clarity on that.
And our SME is here. It's very timely. Not sure if you heard the question, Kurt. Okay. We'll go through the next questions and we'll circle back to the one for Kurt. Okay, next question. From Rosanna. Could Valley Water provide funding for a feasibility study of a multi-use trail crossing to connect the Bay Area Ridge Trail across the Uvis Reservoir Dam spillway or after the spillway? So this grant opportunity is for implementation projects, and that sounds more like a feasibility study. So we will likely have opportunities for feasibility studies in the next grant cycle. So that can cover planning, feasibility studies, that sort of activity. But, if the feasibility study is part of a larger implementation, I could see maybe that, but I would say if the focus is on the putting together or creating a feasibility study, I would wait until next year when we have our planning and feasibility study grants. Okay, next question is from Katrina. What is the anticipated timeline for reimbursement? So once you're once you start and you are getting you're starting to ramp up and start work, whenever you're ready to invoice is up to you. You can invoice monthly or quarterly. It's kind of up to you. It does you the process is you would submit your receipts and documentation. There may be some back and forth between our staff and your staff. Maybe there's questions about the invoice. But once we approve the invoice, usually we cut the check within anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. So that that part is pretty quick. Michael, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I would just add that, we have made significant steps to improve our invoice payment process. And, we'll get a little bit more into the actual budget spreadsheet a little later in this presentation. But yeah, 2 to 4 weeks, but we're hoping to improve that timeline as much as possible.
And I just saw a related question pop up. So how has invoicing been streamlined by Valley Water? So if you've been submitting invoices with us in the past, which I believe Nathan has, it'll be all done in Flux and it'll be a lot simpler. We'll no longer have that large grant spreadsheet. And so you'll see that it's a little quicker and much more streamlined through the Flux system. So we are working on that.
Yeah, and I would just like to add, so for those who are familiar with our budget spreadsheet that you include with your application, and we'll show it a revamped version of that a little bit later, but that's the one and only time that you'll have to fill that out. For invoicing purposes, we've moved towards an actual invoicing form as well as which is different. It's much more simplified, as well as doing submittals through Flux, as Amy had mentioned.
Great. Okay, and we have a question from Rose. How much is left of the mini grant program for this fiscal year? Is it worth applying now or should we wait until July? Robert, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, for the mini grant program, we do still have a few funding left for projects to award out this year. However, it is on a first come, first served basis, and we do have a few applications in the queue. I would still recommend you to submit your application as soon as you can. That way, if we get to it and it crosses the finish line earlier, that would be great. But if not, when the new funding cycle comes around in July, then your application would most likely already be in a spot that's ready to be awarded. As long as it meets all the criteria and the requirements. But yeah, I would just recommend applying it now, for it now. We work together on reviewing it, and getting it to a spot that's ready to be awarded. So
Great. Okay, so we're going to go back to Katrina's question, and I actually see she has her hand up. Can we unmute her maybe, and she can ask her questions that are related to CEQA?
okay, Katrina, you should be able to unmute and ask your question.
Thanks, Robert.
Okay, I think this is working. I actually wanted to clarify my first question, which was about can costs incurred prior to the execution of the grant be used for cost share? And that's specifically about like the 15% match or cost share, but design and permitting costs that are done before the execution of the grant be used towards the cost share for the grant. So just wanted to clarify that one. And then, yeah, my CEQA question for your CEQA expert is just, does Valley Water have any concerns about using SERP, the statutory exemption for restoration projects, which is a new pathway that we've been using for the CEQA permitting for all of our restoration projects in collaboration with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Hi, Katrina. My name is Kurt Leuenberger. I'm Environmental Services Manager here at Valley Water. We are familiar with the SERP and have actually recently used it on some of our own capital projects here. We don't have any objections to its use as long as obviously the project complies and comports with all the requirements that are listed by the statutory and there's no exceptions. We're A-OK with that.
Awesome. Thank you.
And as far as your first question, so we would call that a match. We do require 15% match, and that is for the term of the agreement. So anything that you did before the execution of the agreement wouldn't count towards that 15% match.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Okay, next question. Does having from Nanako, does having an EIR is having an EIR considered completion of CEQA compliance? This EIR covers a large parcel, and the project site we are working on is a portion of the larger parcel. Is this still considered eligible? Michael or Kurt, you want to take that one? We can also, Nanako, if you want to answer live, you're also welcome to ask your question. You could just raise your hand, but I'll pass it over.
I'll start off by saying that an EIR has the potential to be adequate for coverage of any of the environmental impacts associated with an action. It really depends on how it was structured and whether the analysis actually evaluated everything that's occurring and the physical changes in the environment that are related to the proposed grant action that you're requesting. So that's the key feature. So I can't give a definitive answer of saying yes or no, but I can say an EIR is the highest level of environmental review, and typically we can find a way to work with that for most actions that are closely related to whatever is being proposed.
Great, thank you, Kurt. Okay, from Yamina, are PFAS site investigation projects to evaluate impacts to groundwater eligible? I'll try to answer this, but feel free again to raise your hand. So this funding opportunity is for implementation projects, so physical projects. So if you are thinking of like doing an investigative project, it's likely not going to be eligible, but it could be eligible next year under like a feasibility study or our planning grant. So hopefully that answers your question. But investigations and studies are not eligible under the implementation category. But we will have those other opportunities next year. So if that's something you're interested in, please sign up on our listserv, and yeah, we provide updates. And you can do that on our website, valleywater.org/grants. Great. Okay, so I'll give it, anybody else have any questions, want to raise their hand? Otherwise, we'll dive into the next part and have questions after the next segment.
I think Rose might have raised her hand.
Let's see, is Rose still? Oh, she is. Rose.
Hi, my question was answered. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, let's hop into the next section. And again, we'll have Q&A towards the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. So hi, everyone. Now that we've gone over those basic requirements, we're going to talk about maximizing your standard grant application. So as we move into the second half of today's presentation, we're going to focus on tips for maximizing that standard grants application, including how to create a strong project scope, schedule, and budget. One key thing to keep in mind is that anything, I believe Amy mentioned this earlier, but anything that you include in your application, whether it is in your project scope, schedule, or budget, will be carried over into your grant agreement. So this means that anything you submit will be the framework for your entire project, and these will be the commitments that will be detailed in the contract if you are awarded for funding. In short, we like to encourage applicants to treat your application as a contract in the making, because the details you submit will guide the project and its requirements. Next slide, please. All right, so the first step in getting started with your application is registering on the Flux system. We recommend doing this today, as it may take a couple of days for staff to approve your registration. When registering, you will create your own individual profile, which will be connected to a shared organization card where members of the same organization can collaborate, view applications, and submit documents. However, keep in mind that only one person can edit the same application at a time. Next, you will need to identify the person who will be responsible for signing the grant agreement. Documentation of this authority is required in the form of a signed resolution from your organization's governing entity. This is required to be submitted at the time of application, and a sample of it can be found in the 2026 Standard Grant Guidelines. The authorized signatory does not need to be the one to submit the application. We just require you to identify who will be signing the agreement. If you have any questions about the authority documentation, we have a resource guide available that provides some guidance for that document. We also recommend working on the resolution sooner rather than later, as we understand it may take some time to get it signed by your board. Next slide, please. Before we dive into the overview of the scope, budget, and schedule, we would like to share some best practices to keep in mind when filling out your application. It is important to read each question carefully. You'll notice color-coded text and boxes throughout the application, which serve as a helpful guide. Purple text indicates required uploads, and you won't be able to submit your application without those. Purple text, or sorry, did I say purple? Red for the prior one. Purple text provides helpful information to assist you as you fill out the sections, and reminder to be as specific and detailed as you can. What you write in your application will be the guiding basis for what is in your agreement. Also, remember to hit the save button regularly as you work through so you don't lose any progress. Flux does not automatically save. And lastly, make sure that your project clearly ties into the program's mission and priorities as previously mentioned. Next slide, please. And here is a brief overview of how the Flux application is broken down, as you can see, just with the organization information, required documents, project information, scope, project budget, and project readiness. For a full list of the questions and information on documents to upload, please refer to the grant guidelines. You can also go into Flux after you are registered to view the application. And next, I will be passing it off to Clarissa for the next slide.
Okay, so the next few slides will be going over the scope, schedule, and budget. So the scope that highlights the project's purpose and impact. It defines the key tasks and it identifies the project's deliverables and impacts. The project schedule clearly outlines the milestones and deadlines for each task of the project, and that starts from the start date of the project to the final deliverables. So make sure that your timeline aligns with your scope and with your budget. And just be mindful of the time estimate that you put and make sure they're realistic. And also just keep in mind that it needs to align with the overall grant agreement timeline. And Amy kind of touched on that in the beginning. Uh, the budget is a summary of your major expense categories and your funding sources that you need to complete your project. And that includes both cash expenses and in-kind contributions. Again, make sure your budget aligns with your scope. And we have a template that we'll be going over in more detail in a little bit. And it's also available in our resource page. Next slide, please. Okay, regarding the scope, we have broken out the activities into 4 main tasks. The task 1 or first task is planning and design. And for implementation category, these steps are the steps needed before project construction can start. So some example activities could be research, design, getting permits or permissions, and any community outreach or community input type of activities. The task 2 is implementation, And this is putting the plans into action, and that can include the actual construction, removing invasive species, restoring habitats. In this task too, make sure you describe your methodology and how, the supporting evidence will support the activities that you're listing within this task. We will look at activities in the next slide. Um, but for task 3, which is post-implementation, monitoring, and maintenance, this is where you describe how you'll manage the work after the implementation phase is complete and throughout the life of the grant agreement term. So some example of activities in this task could be plant maintenance and monitoring, um, a certificate of completion, and any post-construction activities. Task 4 in the scope is project administration, and this is where you list your administrative tasks that are required to manage the grant project. Examples are invoicing, status reporting, permit administration, and completing the final project fact sheet. Okay, next slide. Okay, each scope task is split up into actions and deliverables. So in the previous slide, I mentioned different actions. So you're required in the application to outline the specific actions that you will take to complete each task. So that's where you want to be detailed about the methodology and describe what you'll do and how you'll do it. You can include any references and supporting evidence that kind of guides your actions. In addition to the actions, you also want to list out your deliverables. The deliverables are tangible outcomes or the outputs that demonstrate your progress and success for that specific task. You'll need to clearly define the deliverables for each of the 4 tasks that I mentioned in the previous slide. So, as Camille mentioned, what you put here in your scope is the basis for what goes into your agreement. So make sure your deliverables are clear, they're measurable, they're specific and realistic, and they do need to align with your project goals and make sense in the timeline. Um, as you submit your invoices and we review them, we will be taking a look at your deliverables and any supporting documentation that you submit with your invoice, and we'll be reviewing before we can approve the invoice. Okay, next slide. Okay, this kind of shows how your actions are broken out into the 4 tasks along with the deliverables. I did mention being detailed. We can't be as detailed in this slide. So this is just an example of how you can break them out. Um, and this this is example is about stabilizing a creek and enhancing riparian habitat and vegetation. So you'll see how in the planning and design task, the action there is finalizing the designs and conducting surveys, and the deliverables are the outcomes of those activities, and so on for tasks 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, it's not as detailed as we would like it to be in your application. Next slide, please. Okay, regarding the schedule, this is another key part of your application, and it shows how you plan to complete the entire project. They should be clearly linked to your task. So if you look at the rows, they're shown in the table. They are the 4 different tasks. Um, and make sure you're demonstrating that each phase will be completed within a realistic time frame. And you should make sure that it reflects the overall scope of the project and have clear start and end dates. For the next slide, it will be budget. Now we'll pass it on to Michael.
Thanks, Clarissa. So going over some of the budget requirements. The budget portion of your grant application must be uploaded as an attachment using the provided Flux template, and we'll show that in a moment. Specifically for implementation grants, as we've mentioned before, the budget must demonstrate a 15% match fund of the total project cost. And it's important to note that you may not include any resources or funding from other Valley Water programs, such as any other grants that you may have received, or any volunteer programs or contracts that you may have with other Valley Water units as part of your matched fundings, or total project cost. You can include in-kind contributions such as volunteer hours, volunteered staff time, and other forms of monetary or in-kind support as part of your match funds. These contributions can be a valuable part of your overall budget, but please make sure to note whether or not these have been secured or pending in your budget spreadsheet. Next slide, please. So at this time, we're going to show a little live demonstration of the budget spreadsheet that you will be filling out and including with your application. There are a couple slides in this slide deck that detail each of those sections with information on filling those out, but those are more for anybody who wants to download a copy of the slide deck, and for anybody who missed this workshop. So for the sake of the actual presentation, we're just going to go straight into the demonstration.
And just
All
real
right.
quick, this template is available in the Flex application.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Amy, for clarifying. So yes, you will be able to download this this template from your Flex application as you're filling it out. So this is essentially what it's going to look like. Here's a little sample that we put together. None of these line items are from any project in particular. We just made it up ourselves. So you can see it is a spreadsheet style template using Microsoft Excel. At the top, you'll fill out your organization name as well as your project title. And the spreadsheet is divided up into three main sections. The first one is going to be personnel and labor. So this is where you'll be filling out your staff costs. So anybody associated with your agency or your organization, and on your payroll, you'll be listing out those costs here for costs that you want reimbursed from the grant. As part of these line items, you can include a loaded hourly rate. So essentially what we're doing for that is we're allowing applicants to establish their own benefits rate that they'd like for each position, and then incorporating that into the hourly rate of that staff member. All that we ask is that you provide a brief explanation of how you came up with those benefits rates in the notes section of the spreadsheet. And then next you'll fill out the number of hours that you're estimating for that person. And that will give you the line item subtotal on the right side. Please note that the auto calculation in the subtotal box is from adding up tasks 1 through 4, but that number, the subtotal, also needs to match your loaded hourly rate multiplied by the number of hours. So there has to be some consistency there. The next section is supplies and services. So this section will be for any materials costs, subcontractors that you hire, any consultants that you bring on, as well as your insurance. So similar to the section above, you'll allocate the amount between the 4 tasks as necessary, and you will list out eligible expenses in the left-hand side, and then the subtotal amounts. We do ask that you provide brief descriptions for each line item. We didn't add it in the example here, but it just helps us have a little bit more clarity when we're evaluating your project applications. You can also list vehicle mileage here if you have any staff utilizing vehicles, or you want to bill for any gas or anything like that. We do it by the federal mileage rate of 70 cents per mile. And then lastly, you can list the insurance, which is now reimbursable. So it'll be up to $5,000 for the lifetime of the grant. And you can list that in this section as well. Moving down to the final section is other funding sources. So this is where you can list out costs that you as the applicant or any project partners that you have will be um, incurring on the project, as well as you can also list out any in-kind contributions. So um, you can see here, one of the examples is project manager. So this represents the costs that this particular agency would be covering for that position. It also lists out any additional grant funding that you received from other agencies. So, like an example is CAL FIRE grant funding. That was a monetary contribution, and it's a secured fund of 25,000, as well as listing volunteer hours at the current rate, which I believe is $33.46 an hour. And that's an in-kind contribution, so you list it out there. At the very bottom is the combined subtotals. So that first line right there. Oh, I see a comment from Nathan. Looks like they updated the standard federal mileage rate to 72, around 72 cents. So yeah, just in any case, please use the most up-to-date federal or mileage rates. Thank you, Nathan. Um, so yeah, going back to this section here at the bottom, the combined subtotals over all four tasks, that is gonna give you the subtotal amount that you're requesting for grant funding. Um, and then the other funding sources subtotal, that's essentially your match. That's how much match funding you'll be providing to the project. And then your grand total of the project costs will be a combination, a total of how much you're requesting for grant funding along with your match funding. And yeah, I think we can leave it there. So yeah, we can stop sharing this. Okay, and then we can skip down to, let's see. Yeah, ineligible costs. Thank you, Robert. So this just outlines some ineligible costs that you're not allowed to list in your budget. So any pre-award expenses that you incurred on the project, obviously you can't list those for reimbursement. Anything to do with land acquisition, we do not reimburse for property acquisition or anything like that. And then, as we mentioned before, any work being covered financially by other Valley Water funds or programs, that would be an ineligible cost. And um, any operational costs for your project, such as like rent, utilities, taxes, um, anything like that, would be not allowed, as well as purchasing construction equipment. That's something that we are not um, reimbursing for. And then lastly, professional development. So things like professional conference registration fees, travel to conferences, anything like that, plane tickets, stuff like that, we're not covering. And if you have any questions on the ineligible costs, please feel free to schedule a meeting with us. We can go into that in detail. Next slide. Okay, and with that, that is the end of our presentation. And so we will open it back up to questions.
All right, we got a question from Emily. What documentation is required to be submitted with invoices for staff hours?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So for staff hours, with the first invoice that you submit, we are asking for timesheets and pay stubs to verify the hourly rate that you're providing. after we review the first invoice and those documents with the first invoice, we are moving towards being more trust-based in that regard. So we will not be asking for timesheets and pay stubs moving forward unless we feel that there's a need that we need to revisit and look at those again. Then we have the right to request those documents at any time during your grant.
Yeah, so you'll want to keep all those files, which I'm sure you all do. Let's see, next question. Given that this is an implementation grant, can we exclude planning and design elements as project task deliverables, especially since some of the elements would be complete and paid for prior to the grant execution date? In other words, could we keep the entire project to the implementation task? Yeah, I mean, so there's planning in the just general sense. So there may be, you have to coordinate getting a contractor on board. So there's that. And then there's planning in the other sense. So yes, you could put everything into the implementation task if all of the planning is complete. Michael, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add that you do score points in the application process for having a robust project description, which includes task one, planning and design. However, it's up to the applicant to um, determine what that means for their project. So the requirement that we ask in regards to like the CEQA coverage and the permitting and all that is that, you know, um, that your project that you're proposing has those coverages and that it's shovel ready for implementation. Um, however, the applicant determines what for this particular grant project, which um, it's exclusive to Valley Water's grant program, defines what planning and design would be for the grant. Um, that's up to the applicant. Hopefully that makes sense. And we can always discuss in a meeting independently if we need.
We're also able to take questions if you want to raise your hand. Okay, can we go to the next slide and then we'll have a little bit more time for Q&A. So like we mentioned earlier, we are available for one-on-one meetings if you want to discuss your project ideas, see if it's possibly eligible, if you want to talk about what are eligible items in the budget. So anything related to the application, of course, we can't tell you how the evaluators will evaluate your project and whether or not it would be funded, but we're certainly here to provide guidance and kind of go a little bit more into depth with your specific project and answer your questions. So you can set up a meeting with us on Calendly. That's probably the easiest way, but you're also welcome to contact us. Here's our phone number, email, and then on our website, we also have that Calendly link. But we are here and we do have those resources for you. Next slide. Okay. We are always looking to improve our workshops and our programs. So we do ask that you provide feedback on the presentation today. You can scan the QR code. The link is there. It's also in the chat. We'll also be sending out a follow-up email with the survey and more details. So again, this presentation will be available on our website probably towards the end of the week. So if you have another coworker, feel free to share it with them. And with that, we will open it back up for questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any, but feel free to send them in. I want to thank you all for spending some time with us this afternoon. Thank you for your interest in our program. I want to thank the staff here for their presentation, and a special thanks to Kurt for helping us out with the CEQA questions. Again, we are here. We'll kind of stick around if anybody wants to ask a question, but with that, we'll say goodbye, and hopefully we hear from you.